Let's bring in CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. So, David, you say Vivek Ramaswamy won. Give us your reasoning.
Well, I mean, he was oozing intellectual heft, if you will, all night long. I mean, his clothes was amazing. He looked comfortable all night long. And most importantly, he was in touch with the base of the party right now. The base of the party is not 1984 Ronald Reagan. That's the old guard. I mean, he's populist. And you know, Trump wasn't on stage, but Ramaswamy was kind of like the Trump stand-in a way. I mean, he was channeling the America First part of it, and he had it all down pat. And he's extreme. He's a really good orator. He's excellent, and he did look comfortable. Now, having said that, he got a little too snarky. He was a little bit too aggressive. Not necessarily where people were pushing back against him, but he was actually looking for a bit of a fight and kind of insulting people on stage. He doesn't need to do that. I think he'll change that next time. But overall, I thought he did very, very well.
Yeah, to your point, he was taking a lot incoming from a lot of the candidates on stage. You know, Nikki Haley, she was talking about his inexperience as it relates to foreign policy. David, what about his lack of experience and seeming substance?
Well, look, those are challenges, clearly, and not sore spots, but places where other candidates are going to go. As a matter of fact, Nikki Haley went there, as we saw in Abigail's piece, and Christie and Pence as well. But I think ultimately the problem for all the other candidates on stage that the energy is with the Vivek Ramaswamy wing of the party. That's the Trump wing of the party. It's the populist wing of the party. And what I thought was interesting last night is that Mike Pence was very agitated throughout the whole debate. I mean, he did fine. He did well. He's a great debater. But he was so frustrated. And you know, Jenna, you and I know Mike Pence well. I mean, he doesn't typically get this frustrated, but he was. Why was he frustrated? That's the key question. Because he sees a Vivek Ramaswamy at 38 years old being a populist, doing something exactly the opposite of the way he remembers the Republican Party, especially from a foreign policy standpoint. He doesn't like it. Neither does Nikki Haley. And that's why Pence was so frustrated with this young whippersnapper, and he doesn't like the direction that the party is going.
Yeah. You know, Vivek is kind of that populist candidate like Donald Trump. Do you think some of these voters might jump ship from Donald Trump to Vivek?
I don't think so. I mean, I think they're playing for the same type of MAGA voter. And here's the problem for Vivek is that the MAGA voters, this just in, are with Trump and they're not going anywhere. I do think that he has a chance to reach some in the younger generation. But I don't think this is ever, honestly, Jenna, this debate last night was really a debate for second place. I mean, Donald Trump at this point is going to be the nominee. Remember, Jenna, a lot of people had said that once the first indictment came down, that was going to hurt Trump. That'll hurt his poll numbers. Second indictment, third, fourth. No, it's making him stronger. So now these candidates have to hope that a conviction of President Trump will be the way they become the nominee at the last second. Once again, I still think that's a long shot. I don't think that's going to happen either. Yeah.
It's been remarkable to see, you know, maybe a possible Hail Mary. CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody, thank you. Have a great evening.
You bet. Thanks, Jenna.
Well, was it a mysterious plane crash or a brazen attack? Coming up, why all signs point to a political assassination in Russia. Welcome back. Shocking news out of Russia, where mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin and other top officers of his private Wagner military group are said to have been killed in a plane crash outside of Moscow. Now there's widespread speculation it was an assassination. CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke is covering the story. Caitlin, what do we know about the crash?
Jenna, we know it was Prigozhin's private plane that went down, and eyewitnesses told Russian media they heard two loud explosions before it fell from the sky and burst into flames on impact.
This video shows the plane suddenly plummeting from its cruising altitude of 28,000 feet. All 10 people on board are reported dead, and Russian authorities have confirmed Prigozhin was on the flight. An investigation is now underway, but so far no reason for the crash has been reported. Some images from the wreckage reportedly show puncture marks, which experts believe could suggest a missile strike rather than a bomb blast.
When we look at the wreckage, you don't see any of that outward expansion that you might see in a bomb. Also, you would think that the Wagner folks would be very protective of the airplane and not to allow a bomb onto that airplane.
President Joe Biden says he's not surprised and hinted that he believes Putin could be behind the crash.
There's not much that happens when Russia is Putin not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
Back in June, Prigozhin led a brief mutiny, pulling thousands of his Wagner Group fighters out of Ukraine and directing them instead to march on Moscow. Prior to the rebellion, the mercenary chief called out Russia's defense establishment for alleged mismanagement of the war in Ukraine and denying weapons to his soldiers. He called off the coup after allegedly cutting a deal with Putin.
Back in 2018, Putin did an interview where he said everything is forgivable except betrayal. Clearly, Prigozhin betrayed Putin, and every day that Prigozhin was walking around a free man in Russia was a symbol of humiliation and the weakness in Putin's regime.
During a press briefing this afternoon, Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder confirmed initial U.S. assessments do suggest that Prigozhin was killed in the crash. They have no information about how the plane was taken down. However, they do not have reason to believe it was a surface-to-air missile. Jenna?
All right, National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke, thank you. Peter Duran is an adjunct senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, specializing in Russia, Ukraine, and transatlantic relations. Peter, welcome. So we learned today Putin sent condolences to Prigozhin's family. Do you think this was a Putin-led assassination?
No, those were crocodile tears we saw from Vladimir Putin. The death of Prigozhin adds a major chapter break to Russia's long, hot summer of political and military instability, and his death proves Vladimir Putin's old saying, if you're going to shoot at the king, don't miss. If you're going to launch an insurrection, don't fail, because the price of failure is death, and Prigozhin has now paid that price. Putin is sending a message to everyone else who would try and challenge him. There is a line, you're not allowed to cross it, and that line is insurrection.
Peter, what happens to the notorious Wagner Group now with Prigozhin gone? Does it create somewhat of a power vacuum?
There is a power vacuum, but the Kremlin is moving very quickly to reassert its control over this mercenary group. Frankly, Wagner does a lot of things that the Kremlin likes and wants to continue. It continues to help seed instability in Africa. It continues to provide cannon fodder with soldiers for Russia's ongoing illegal invasion of Ukraine. And there's a lot of nefarious business transactions that go on around the world that Wagner can funnel money back into the pockets of Russia's elite. Putin needs Wagner to exist, although we might see a rebranding and a reemergence under a new leader. In one way or the other, Wagner will continue.
Yeah, Peter, did this attempted coup by Prigozhin, did it expose weakness of Vladimir Putin and Russia's strength and military?
That's correct. In fact, that's one of the major reasons why Putin had to act to eliminate Prigozhin. He had become this figurehead around whom others could rally. His soldiers remain very loyal to him, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more political violence as different factions within Russia fight it out. We could see some reprisal attacks by former Wagner soldiers in retaliation for the death of their boss. That's something to be aware of as we go forward in the next few months.
Final question for you, Peter. Does this have implications for the war in Ukraine?
Absolutely. Wagner played a critical role in fighting in that war. Its troops were some of the best equipped and most effective fighters in the battlefield. Now, it's important to remember the Ukrainians are making progress against Russia, and I think we can look at this instability inside Wagner, instability inside the Russian political elite, as an indicator that the Ukrainians have an opportunity here to push hard and push now while Russian elites are on their back heels after Prigozhin's death.
All right, Peter Duran with FDD, thank you so much for coming on this evening. We appreciate your expertise.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, new numbers out today point to resiliency in the economy. Why that could change when we come back. Welcome back. Tonight, new jobless claims are holding steady, suggesting resiliency in the economy, even amid persistently high inflation. Jobless claims dropped to their lowest level in 3 weeks, marking 9 straight weeks where they've been at 250,000 or below. Today's report from the Labor Department shows unemployment claims last week at 230,000, down by some 10,000 new claims from the previous week. And with that, let's bring in Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst and the Washington Bureau Chief at Bankrate. Mark, good to see you this evening. So no sign of rising layoffs. We're about to get a monthly employment report next week. Do you expect the labor market to soften at all? And what does it mean for the economy that the jobs market is so tight?
Yeah, great to see you, Jenna. All great questions, and I wish I had a crystal ball, but here's what we think. First of all, the job market has been weakening, but still remarkably resilient and robust. The unemployment rate has barely budged and currently at 3.5%. It wasn't that long ago that was the decades-long low. We got back to 3.4% very recently. Where we've seen the moderation, really, Jenna, has been in the hiring numbers. And we expect that to be the case with the forthcoming August employment report. But we've also seen, I'll call it moderation with respect to the layoffs. We know that those have been focused around sectors like technology, around media, the streaming business, now having to try to aim for a profit. Financial services, mortgage refinancings are sort of dead in the water at the moment. The housing market is challenged. And now retail is experiencing some struggles. So while the economy is driving ahead, it's a bit of a bumpy ride here, and the widespread forecast, of course, has been for what, 1.75 years now that the risks of recession are elevated, but we just haven't had that happen. And indeed, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta at the moment is looking for GDP in the current quarter to be north of 5%. That's just wild. We'll see whether that develops. But what I would say is we should expect for the job market to weaken, but our predictions about that weakening over the last 1.5 years or so have been premature.
Yeah. You make the point. We've been talking about the possibility of recession for close to 2 years now. What's your assessment now? Do you still think it's likely, or how do you see it?
Well, a recession is always likely. The problem is we just don't know the timing, the depth, the duration, or the severity. And so we need to acknowledge that the economy goes through cycles. Currently, we believe through an expansion mode, and a recession will occur. And that's why we need to try to bulletproof our finances by paying down debt, having emergency savings, and continuing to create a retirement fund if we haven't yet retired. But right now, the economy looks solid.
So tomorrow, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell will address an annual gathering in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Mark, could we see Powell signaling maybe another interest rate hike?
I think what he'll do at the Jackson Hole Symposium will be to signal that they're keeping their options open, but the so-called risks for the economy are now better balanced, meaning they're not only worried about inflation. Inflation appears to have peaked, not yet to their 2% target. It's possible they'll raise rates this fall, but financial markets participants, investors, if you will, are betting the Fed is done raising rates.
Yeah, just a few seconds left, but Bankrate has a new survey. 9 out of 10 Americans want a 4-day work week, remote work, or hybrid work. Just a few seconds, Mark, but has the pandemic changed the way we see work?
That's entirely the reason, Jenna, and employees have really sort of tasted the fruits of these opportunities. The question is how many employers can provide those opportunities?
All right, Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. Thank you, Mark. Have a great night.
You too.
Amazing Grace, still ahead, the heartfelt message from a Haitian nurse to her captors. Finally tonight, Amazing Grace. For the first time, we are hearing from the U.S. nurse kidnapped in Haiti. In her first public statement, Alex Dorsonville, who was kidnapped by a notorious gang and held captive with her young daughter for nearly 2 weeks this summer, expressed a message of love for her captors and for Haiti.
I want you to know that I hold no grudges against you in my heart. That doesn't mean that I agree with what you are doing, especially what you are doing against your own Haitian brothers and sisters.
Some 1,500 people were killed in Haiti in just the first 4 months of this year. There are reports the ransom for Dorsonville's release reached $1 million. It's not clear, though, whether that was paid or not. What is clear, Dorsonville's message of forgiveness, telling her captors, quote, "One day I hope to hug you in heaven." Amazing grace indeed, and we will leave it on that note this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.